Thanks for joining me for another episode of Tryp Rapport. On today's solo episode, I'm going to talk about my recent trip to the Reality Center in Santa Monica, California. The Reality Center has been on my radar for many years now. I've tried various modalities over the years that claim to mimic the effects of psychedelics, but honestly, all have been letdowns. When Colin first told me about the Reality Center, it piqued my interest, as I had heard of other technologies that used strobe lights to allegedly induce psychedelic visuals, and the Reality Center seemed to take it up a notch. He graciously threw me the invite countless times. However, my hatred of LA traffic was always just strong enough to prevent me from taking that journey. At the psychedelic conference in Denver a few months ago, I saw a few companies promoting the strobe light technology headsets offering discounted demos, but although I can't remember what the cost was, it was high enough that I thought mushrooms are cheaper, so why would I waste my money when I can just experience the real thing? Fast forward to my recent episode with Manu. In that conversation, he really sparked my interest in these technologies again. I know he has had many experiences with psychoactive compounds, and not only did he vouch for the Reality Center, but he also invested in the company. There had to be something to this place. I had a trip planned to San Diego a few weeks after recording that episode, so I reached out to Manu to see if it was possible to get up there for a visit. Huge shout out to Manu for getting it set up, and John at the Reality Center for bringing us in. After 4 hours in LA traffic, Manu and I were joined by my sister-in-law, and we were welcomed into the doors of the beautiful space. John had a good, calm energy about him, and the center itself felt like the inside of a castle that was dimly lit with a wide array of colors. We gathered in a comfortable meeting space to get to know each other a bit better and share our intentions for the journey. After being briefed about what to expect, we hopped on the tables and dove right in. My sister-in-law and I were side by side on the standard tables, basically massage tables. We were given noise-canceling headphones. A dolphin stuffed animal with a vibration device in it was placed on our chests, and the LED units were placed about 12 inches above our eyes. John's voice came into the headphones to make sure we were ready. We agreed, and he started us off with some guided breath work as the journey began. The best way for me to describe my first 5 minutes was utter chaos. The bed and dolphin began to vibrate, and I heard what sounded like a combination of static and helicopter blades rotating. I saw white visual static with orbs of red circulating through it. It was interesting to see the closed-eye visuals while completely sober, but they weren't geometric, nor did they have any aspect of beauty as most true psychedelic visuals do. Hearing what sounded like chopper blades quickly steered my mind to my only experience in a helicopter, and that was on my trips to and from Fallujah. Full disclosure, on my flight to San Diego, I was working on a follow-up article for ABMP magazine in which I detailed my time in Fallujah, so that experience was fresh on my mind going into this, but I was initially worried that I might be working my way into processing some military stuff on this journey. However, the static and chopper sounds transitioned into music, and my mind and the visuals immediately began to calm down. The red and white began to transition into a full array of colors, but honestly, it still felt more like a light show than a psychedelic experience. I typically find my hands over my heart on psychedelic journeys, and initially I had my hands on the dolphin's tail, which was closer to the bottom of my ribcage or my upper stomach. I moved my hands above the dorsal fin, which was directly over my chest, and the weight of my hands pulled the device closer, which enhanced the vibration in my core. I then began to see what looked like a spoked wheel, more like a wagon wheel than a bicycle wheel, and it was spinning. As it was spinning, it also began to rotate like a gyroscope. It was shades of blue and red, interesting to watch, but this was really the only patterned visual that I witnessed in addition to the aforementioned light show. Interestingly, my legs began to tremor, like I had mentioned in previous ayahuasca and psilohuasca experiences. It was very mild and pretty isolated from the knees down, but it was clear that this technology was powerful enough to induce the somatic release that people often experience on psychedelics. The mild tremors continued for about 5 minutes, and then my legs completely relaxed, and it felt as if my entire body melted into the table. From there, I couldn't tell you if 5 minutes or 5 hours had passed. I just observed that light show with the occasional wagon wheel behind my eyelids, completely content without a worry in the world. It was so relaxing, even more so than an hour in a sensory deprivation tank. Before we began the journey, John had prepped us saying that when the experience ends, just to lie there for a moment and try not to get up too quickly, because often that's when some of the best stuff happens, and that was precisely the case. After the hour on the table, the music and lights kicked off suddenly, and I immediately saw a pattern that looked like thousands of little blobs stacked on top of each other, and one by one they began to detach from one another and rain down toward me. It was super cool to watch, and hands down the closest thing I've ever seen to a psychedelic visual while sober. I watched these blobs melt and rain down until the visuals completely faded away, and like that, the experience was over, and we were completely back to baseline. We hopped up off the table. I asked my sister-in-law what she thought, and she said, "I don't have the words," which is probably the most accurate response to this experience. I hope to get her on here at some point to discuss her journey as someone who has never experienced any psychedelic substances. However, personally, although I thought it was pretty cool to see the closed-eye visuals and experience the somatic release, with the exception of the last couple minutes with the melting blobs, it felt a little underwhelming compared to your typical psychedelic experience. We made our way back to the meeting room for some integration. I asked John, were we at level 10 there? Is there any way to ramp up the experience with higher volume or stronger vibration? And he replied, "That's what the waterbed's for." I think he read my mind at that moment as he asked, "Do you want to give it a try?" I obliged. When I asked Manu previously what his thoughts were between the standard bed and the waterbed, he said that it was a Volkswagen versus a Maserati. We went to the other room, and in it was a single, much bigger bed with a bunch of screens and other tech behind it. I laid down, got the dolphin, headphones, and lights placed above my head, and John came into the headphones again. He said, "I don't think you need the warm-up this time. I'm just going to drop you right in." And I told him go for it. The vibration and sounds kicked in again. Instant chaos, the red and white static, but this time only for about 10 seconds before it transformed into super interesting visuals. The vibration was on a whole new level. I felt like I was in Augie's LSD/Ibogaine journey where he was riding on the back of the giant bumblebee. I was immediately grinning ear to ear. The initial sounds transitioned into arguably the coolest didgeridoo song that I've ever heard. I've always been a fan of didgeridoo in that enhanced state, but to truly feel the bass of the didgeridoo on that waterbed was truly mesmerizing. My grin went wider than ear to ear. I think it was wrapped around clear to the back of my head. That didgeridoo seemed like it was at least 2 hours long, and those 2 hours weren't long enough. Honestly, if the experience after death is just an eternity of vibrating to that didgeridoo song, I'm good with that. Following the didgeridoo was a track called "Sit Around the Fire," which I believe is from the John Hopkins playlist by East Forest, which includes a beautiful lecture from Ram Dass. His words are powerful, and after that didgeridoo and dolphin vibrated my heart open, it was exactly what I wanted or needed to hear. I think I felt a tear or two run down my cheek, and that smile that was wrapped all the way around my head went even further as it wrapped clear around the back and to the front again. I honestly don't know how long I was on the table. I feel like it was at least as long as I was on the other table, if not longer, but I believe it was only 15 to 20 minutes. Finally, John shut it down, and again I saw those weird orbs appear and melt down on top of me again as my smile unwrapped from around my head and returned to normal. I was sold. The waterbed experience, albeit a fraction of the length of my hour experience on the regular table, easily holds a spot in the top 10 coolest things I've experienced on this planet, and that goes up against all of my true psychedelic experiences. I was admittedly a bit let down after that first hour on the standard bed, but I was a believer after that waterbed. Truly a Volkswagen versus a Maserati. My sister-in-law got her chance to experience the didgeridoo in the Ram Dass, and I saw the same smile and tears on her face. Again, I really hope to get her on here to talk about her experience. My mind was truly blown, so much so I forgot my Yeti cup up there. Small price to pay for such a life-changing experience. I had to laugh that I put this off for so long because of LA traffic, but it was absolutely worth not only the 8 hours of driving that day, but the flight across country to get there. If you're listening to this, Manu and John, I truly can't thank you enough for facilitating this experience. This technology can change the world. Having experienced both the standard bed and the water bed, I cannot stress how much I recommend paying the extra couple bucks to upgrade to the full experience. My shortened experience on that waterbed was unbelievable, and I very much look forward to my next trip to Southern California to get the full hour of that experience. All I can say is that if you find yourself in Southern California, don't even bother wasting your time or money at Disney, Six Flags, Legoland, SeaWorld, walking through Hollywood, etc. Do yourself a favor, drive to Santa Monica, and take the journey inside yourself. It will change your life. Until next time, love you guys.